What's going on, Matt?
Not much, just being a dad. That's about it. So I don't think I've ever actually formally met you, Tricks. I've seen you around, but yeah, how's it going? Also, hey Patrick.
Yeah, yeah, your name definitely looks familiar. I'm pretty sure I've seen you around as well, but pleasure to meet you in a slightly more real way.
Slightly.
Yeah.
Um, let's give it like 2 more minutes and then we'll start.
I did start the recording, by the way, so just FYI, everybody, we are now being recorded.
All right. Since we're being recorded, we can like do introductions. Um, maybe we'll start with me. I guess you guys know me, but I'll introduce myself anyway. I'm Mike. I founded Abundance Protocol a few years back, basically to tackle the challenge of public goods value capture in one form or another. And at some point, I realized that um, building this actually requires a lot more community input and a lot more coordination with kind of the broader ecosystem. And that's why we have the public goods value capture initiative. That's why you guys are all here and you decided to join this effort. Um, and I mean, that I think this is good for now. Let's go to maybe Triggs.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Triggs. I've been around the ecosystem for a while. As not the first time today, I've heard someone comment that they've seen me around. I tend to I don't know, get kind of chatty once in a while on the internet, and then get really quiet and not be so chatty. So yeah, you might have caught me during one of those times. I am a Taoist. I like decentralized stuff, and human coordination is a pretty essential part of that, in my opinion. I don't think we can decentralize if we can't coordinate. And um, value capture is an important part of incentivizing coordination. So that's kind of my main motivation for being here. My personal project is Nearhouse. We are kind of a consulting service provider for projects that are interested in learning about decentralization and protocols and what makes a Web3 protocol. So I spend my time kind of working on that and helping projects pursue that path. So I guess that's me and why I'm here.
Hey, I thought we're just going around and introducing ourselves for now. Patrick, you want to go next?
Sure. Well, I'm interested in this because I'm interested in value at a more, I would say, fundamental level. Uh, and what I mean is that I'm an old C and C++ programmer, and I've used some programs. This is going to be short, but it sounds off track. But anyway, uh, there's a void pointer in C, and people don't use it much because it's very confusing. And so what I have decided and I've just tried to do is split value into different types. And I split it into land and work as inputs and goods and services as outputs. And but then I rebundle goods and services. Anyway, so I have tickets as the outputs, and then deeds and contracts as the inputs. And the reason I think it's important, and then this is that the value that we seek as profit sometimes is in conflict with abundance. And um, and so I'll just leave it at that. But I really appreciate being here and having me. Thank you.
You muted, Mike.
Matt. I was just gonna say thank you, Patrick. Matt, you can go next.
Yes, I guess my framing for what I'm working on and how it's kind of plugs into this discussion that we're about to have is mostly within the context of green pill network, and like from the very zoomed out view and figuring out a lot like impact accounting tied to value flows and value capture and figuring out how basically financial sustainability can kind of be created via a bunch of different pieces of the puzzle. Um, so yeah, I'm mostly just wearing a lot of different hats and trying to keep the trains running on time within Green Pill. Yeah, I guess for a little bit of context, but before I'm actually relatively new to the blockchain space compared to everybody else in this call. I've only actually been touching stuff and like being a part of DAOs for about a year and change. But the previous decade, I was basically living within the online fantasy sports community world. So definitely a ton of experience within like online communities and how stuff can actually kind of come together there and like yeah, a lot of value capture type musings. But yeah, happy to be here.
All right, thank you, Matt. Afo, I'm not sure if you can talk. If you could, you can introduce yourself. If not, that's okay too. All right, that's fine. So in this case, since we're already recording and we have a bunch of people here, I think we can kind of start our first sync. And the idea behind this call is really to start with framing the problem, because obviously before we jump to solutions, we need to make sure we're on the same page of what it is we're trying to solve. I put an article last night. I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to read it or not, but that's kind of my perspective on kind of the bigger framework of what I'm trying to resolve. The issue that I see in the economy um, in in relation to public goods and how that's related to negative externalities and to kind of perverse incentives and like kind of all that thing wrapped together. Um, so my framing, as I described in the article, is really that we have kind of consumer goods, we have commercial goods, and we have public goods. And we kind of have a way to capture the value of consumer goods and of commercial goods, but not so much of public goods. And because we don't have a way to capture the value of public goods, um, we try to capture them at the moment in other ways, which is basically through commercial goods um, or through consumer goods, or just not capture it at all. And the problem is that that creates a lot of negative externalities because when instead of building for everyone, you're building for a corporation, suddenly the incentives are a bit switched. And you can actually, if you're just trying to make more money, um, that can hurt the broader community, the overall society. So um, I'm not sure if I want to um, kind of get consensus around this view or debate it. I think debate maybe, I mean, it really depends on you guys how you view it. But that's kind of my perspective that we need a mechanism to create um, what I call um, community economic entities. Um, and this community economic entities would be basically representing a public, and you can scale it in the sense that you can have a small community, join with other communities, and then you don't have to get everyone on board right away. You can kind of start small, and once you have this economic unit, then um, that's a way to capture value within that unit. Basically, you have this unit that says, we value these things, and therefore that creates demand for public goods. So that's kind of how I view the challenge. It's perfectly fine if you completely disagree with it, and then we can have like a discussion on what is actually the problem and how we can address it. But that's kind of how I view it. And if you guys want to frame it in another way and present that, like I feel like first let's analyze the problem space, and once we have kind of the problem space properly analyzed, and we maybe bring more perspectives on board, or we feel like this is a good definition, then we can move into the solution space. That's kind of my view. Feel free to jump in, and like if you have comments on that, if you have different perspectives. Thank you.
I think it sounds great. I love starting out with a mutual understanding of the problem space. I think that's critical. Getting terms defined, context set, all of these like little nuances in the discussion that makes it really complicated because this is not an easy topic. I think the more clear we can all be on the same page at the beginning, then the more easily we'll stick with each other throughout. And I think another important thing to keep in mind that I've been thinking about is that this is going to be an ongoing process, and it's an open public process. So people are going to be coming and leaving. And so I think that I personally feel like we should prioritize trying to create like something that's trackable, right? That like I like to work in Miro boards. I don't know. That's like how my brain works. A lot of people do Figma in this world, but visually, tracking things, having some sort of conclusion at the end of each workshop, so that the next time we do a workshop, we can quickly recap for all the new people, catch everybody up, remind everybody, been going on. I think this will really help this whole process move in a cohesive kind of progressing way.
Yep, I definitely agree with that.
I just had a
So,
quick question about whether or not, uh, so would you say that funding open source free software is kind of a subset of all this? Is it pretty obvious that's true?
yes,
Yeah.
I would say so.
Okay. That's lovely.
Matt, Apple, any comments?
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Love mirror boards. Definitely like create my. Yeah, definitely sounds good too.
All right. Um, so let me just see. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that we do have, to track things, and I think Amiable are perfectly a good place to do that. We can start one, I guess, after the call, and then we can just, decide what goes in there, what we want to sort, and what we want to represent. Um, and oh, all right.
If you
I
want,
guess
you
we
could just
have
use
one.
this one. I started this just in anticipation, and that's a invite link. So anybody who clicks that link should get an editable permission guest invite to the board. So feel free to join. And I just started like writing down a couple of things, but yeah, jump in. Let's just go nuts.
Perfect. And then you can just edit to the Telegram, and we can go from there. Let me actually do it right now. All right. Do you guys think we should kind of jump into the problem space right now, or we have kind of more, I guess, administrative, um, setting up stuff to do before that? Because I mean, I agree with the mirror board. Um, just keeping track of our conversations, and also, tricks we discussed, having kind of a monthly cadence of more public conversations of basically, this is what we're doing in the group, and this is what, you still want to do it in kind of, this high signal group, and at the same time present it to the public, so it's not just, you're not building this thing in the middle of a highway with a lot of noise, but rather in a more signal focused group. And then you can present progress and challenges and so on, to the broader public, and get input, and maybe get kind of members if they want to join in, and so on. So that's kind of the progress, how we're seeing it. And initially, I think the thought was like, we can nail it down in like, 2.5 months or so. I think, we should do it as long as it takes. Like, I don't think putting like arbitrary limits is useful. I do believe in kind of the urgency of this. I don't think that, this is, we can just, this is not like a coffee break. We don't just come here to chat. I do think that this is something that's necessary, and there's kind of crises in the economy that, like, I don't know if we will solve it, but if we can at least move the ball forward on, like, figuring out some of these issues that can at least help someone somewhere. So I do feel like there is an urgency to to figure these, like the problem space and the solution space. But I don't think that setting arbitrary time limits is that helpful. So that's kind of the idea. So I kind of removed the time limits in the charm verse, and I just said, we're in phase two, and we want to kind of move forward um, fast, but at the same time, um, deliberate, in a deliberate manner. So that's kind of the process. Um, Anything else on the administrative part, like how we're doing it versus what we're doing, from anyone here? All right. So should we jump into kind of tackling the problem space a little bit? You guys want to bring up maybe other frameworks, or if you guys had a chance to read, or just from my description earlier, like, do you guys have comments, criticism, anything is good.
Sorry, I was just throwing some notes and links in the Miro board. I got the link for the charm verse and the paragraph. I'll organize this Miro board a little bit more, but just from, I guess, one tail end of the administrative stuff. My suggestion for Miro board is that people kind of like feel free to use it however you want. That it's an infinite whiteboard, so like go find a little corner and carve out a little section for your notes and take your notes in the Miro board throughout the call, and then everyone can share each other's notes, and then asynchronously we can kind of go through and organize and maybe create like a shared zone in the middle or something. But yeah, just feel free to go. I should have had like a little template or something to give people something to kind of start with, but yeah, it's free form, so knock yourself out. You can't go wrong in a Miro board.
All right, I'm there. Oh, and you have the public goods quadrants. Nice.
Yeah, I feel like, especially for these kinds of workshops, having visual aids is extremely helpful, because we're conceptualizing. And so words can kind of get confused in the context in our mind when we're trying to like picture it. I mean, everybody has their own shape rotator or whatever, all that stuff. Like different brains work differently, but so maybe the visual aids aren't as helpful for some people, but for me, it really is. Um, so I think this will, in my opinion, I think this will help engage more people by having something to look at when we ask a question, to respond to, so you can like look at it, ponder, think about it, and conjure up your response. But
Yeah, and if you guys have kind of your own, I think the links, especially like if we have different perspectives, and like maybe the key concepts that if they're in conflict or something like that, we can almost battle it out graphically, basically saying we have this concept here, we have this concept here, this is the disagreement. How do we bridge it, resolve it, or at least acknowledge that there's differences. So I think that's very you know useful. You also said, Triggs, I think you mentioned before, some AI that helps with mediating kind of discussions.
Oh yeah,
I
harmonica.
think
That'd be a fun one for sure. We could do some async stuff. Maybe like during the workshop, we can craft some prompts for it. I'd be happy to kind of do a little quick demo or something at some point if we want to do that. Or maybe we could do a side session on setting up the harmonica thing if we don't want to take too much time of the workshop. But yeah, so in short, it's just like it's an AI assisted deliberation tool. So you give it a prompt for the topic that you're trying to deliberate on, and then you can customize that to whatever degree that you want. You got a lot of different. You can dig into the nitty gritty of the prompt outputs and stuff to configure it. But basically, then everybody engages with this like it's a chatbot, and the chatbot just asks them questions and they respond to the questions, and then you can have it set up to cross pollinate responses from people. So as more people respond, the AI will start to integrate those responses into the questions that it asks other users to get like verification of insights from people or alternate opinions to those insights. So it can create a really interesting output in the end that it's like not it's not what you would get from just prompting an AI to give you a general answer to a question. It's using AI to concatenate the responses of everyone and integrate and cross pollinate their thoughts. So that could be fun.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never tried it, but I am curious how it works. And like you've tried it, right? You like.
I've played around with it a little bit. I haven't like been totally had my like blow my socks off moment with it because it requires a large enough group to really get enough context. I've tested it with a couple of people and it's like, ooh, you can kind of see the potential. And it's like, ooh, this could be really cool. But you really need, at least like 10, 15 people minimum, I would say, for it to produce like a really impressive result.
Uh-huh. And does it come like, is it almost like something that comes to consensus of like the different views? Is that what it does?
Um, Yeah, I mean, I think that it really depends on how much consensus there is within the group. If there's a lot of different opinions, it might create a compare and contrast of like two different groups of views. Like it just identifies the full sentiment and scope, and then tries to create some final summary of all of that in whatever way is accurate.
That could almost be a mechanism that we use for like maybe not the mechanism in a sense that like I don't know if it's open source or not, stuff like that, but it could be a tool that we use as as we develop um, more this on the solution part. Um,
Yeah.
because that's really what I feel is one of the things that are missing is that you know you need any group needs to come up to some kind of sense making ability, especially if it's like a larger group, if it's like a community. So that's a tool that maybe not the solution, but something that can assist in the sense making. And hopefully if it's like open source and you can actually see how it works, as opposed to just trust me, bro.
Right.
um, so that could be something to consider for the solution space.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to create a little section on the Miro board for tool ideas, and people can just dump their tool ideas in here, and we can kind of just have a repository of potential. Just another comment on Miro boards. Like whenever I'm actively working in a workshop or something like this, I tend to just throw things in sticky notes because it's quick, and then I can organize it and structure it into something visually a little bit more sensible later. So, yeah, feel free to follow suit. If you throw some extra sticky notes in there, I'll just organize them later. I like like letting Miro boards be as disorganized as they have to be during the workshop because you can always organize it more later.
Nice. Any other do we need anything else? Do you think, like, so we have, Telegram, we have the mirror, we, we're gonna use Unlock next time for the events. I promise. I was not aware you can do events with Unlock. I really thought it's just for POAPs. I was like, oh, wait a minute. But anyway, so that's that. I guess Google Meets is fine for you guys. So that's just in terms of, what we use. Um, but more to, like, what we're actually trying to accomplish. Um, what do you guys think is a good way to approach kind of the problem space? Is it, using the mirror and like kind of dropping things in there and like, different perspectives, different approaches, questions, stuff like that? Um, or do you think like the workshop is a good um, environment to maybe like come up with questions ahead of time, or like come up with ideas that you want to discuss or debate or whatever? And I'm very open to debates, discussions. Like, I think this should be kind of an intellectual space, but intellectual space also means that open for debate, open for, you know, widely uh, different opinions that you can share, and share it kind of, um, you know, I don't know, is safely a good a good word for it, but basically, share it as, an intellectually curious person, that, or even be devil's advocate, basically say, well, you have this idea, but let's really interrogate it. Let's really see if it stands. And I think that's important for, we have too much, building and without the thinking. Um, and then people don't like to be challenged. And I think we need to do it the other way. We need to challenge the ideas, try to get to the bottom of them. And then if we see that something doesn't, doesn't hold, we can either, figure out other ways. There should not be like, I think actually Stella said that we don't want to create an environment where, someone is presenting, especially like since I started the group, I don't want anyone to feel like that I'm pushing. Yes, I have ideas, but I'm not trying to push them onto others. I'm presenting them, and like I'm putting them in the center. Please interrogate it. If it doesn't hold, pull it apart. That's the point. And the point is to actually get to a solution, and not to like push one solution or another if it doesn't work. Um, so that's the idea. So, feel free to interrogate, feel free to, if you feel that um, it's too, you're being too extreme in how you interrogate. At least in my perspective, there's no such thing, as long as you're kind of reasonable in what you're saying, as opposed to just, yeah, exactly the opposite of an echo chamber. So that's the idea. And that's kind of what I want to foster. And anything can be questioned, anything can be debated, anything can be interrogated. Um, and I don't really know um, what's, the best way when like you have an idea, it was interrogated. Maybe some people disagree. Um, you know, we're still a community, but at the same time, we do want to kind of advance in the process. Like if there is disagreement, maybe we'll see how things progress. Like, if there is conflict, what's exactly the path. But I guess we'll just, see as things unfold. There's a lot of kind of stewardship, and a lot of people who have experience with like DAOs here. So I'm kind of happy to um, give them a little bit more, kind of get more feedback from them on how, conflicts are managed, stuff like that. Regis is a good person for that also. Um, so in that sense, like, resolving issues, we'll see how things unfold. I don't want to jump ahead. Maybe we'll just be perfectly harmonious throughout and we're just gonna design something beautiful that everyone loves, and that's also great. So that's kind of my thinking. Like, I'm not too focused on the management part. I'm really more focused on you know analyzing this thing, and coming to solutions that we can then present in the open and build, and actually have people use it for the benefit of communities and kind of larger sections of society. That's the idea. Do you guys want to jump into like a discussion or a debate of the problem space, or like what do you guys think? You guys want to kind of present out your view or like your perspective on the problem space, maybe? Anyone?
I'm wondering if anybody has something they want to jump in with, please interrupt me and start going. I'm wondering if we can. If not, though, I'm wondering if we can maybe dissect that prompt a little bit more, to make it a little bit more accessible, just to get going. Because the problem space is pretty confusing, as we've covered already. So maybe we can zero in on what maybe a question that I would ask you to help us get started is, what part of this, like, what started your intrigue in this problem space? Like, what was one example, one tangible example that keyed you off to what was wrong with this current system that we have?
Well, so I think I just told this story to a few of you, maybe some of you, but I mean, for me, it started like almost 2 decades ago when I was still in college. And it's really that I kind of saw the trajectory of automation. And it was still not AI. AI was not a thing back then, but I realized that at some point, and I was looking at it kind of, toward like the 2040, 2050, where you could have automation with all these machine learning, actually, but that basically, we already had this, iPhones and stuff like that, that a new technology, like a new update to the software, is already spread to like hundreds of millions of devices. And then the more you build on that, it seemed to me that you have this automation that's accelerating, and you be able to do a lot more with automation, that the skill development for people is just not fast enough to match that. So if we're competing with machines, we're going to be out competed, which means that our economy is just going to fall apart, basically. And that realization that there's no alignment between the people who are building these machines and society. Like, they're not building it for the public good, they're building it for kind of their corporate interest, or whatever interest there is. And there's really no way for them to build it for the public interest, because there's no structure for it, there's no economic incentive to allow them to do that. And I realized that that's kind of part of the problem, that if we keep going in the same direction without any way for like a public to capture the value of like these machines or whatever tools that we're building, we're just going to have, even though you're going to have like very advanced technology and it could benefit society a lot, it's not going to benefit society because there's no economic interest for it to do that. And it's going to instead create these dystopian reality just because of the way the economy is structured. So, and eventually realize that what would that would lead to, basically, that money would be worthless at some point. And then doesn't matter what career path you take, if you want to save money for retirement or whatever, if the money is going to be worthless, then um, That's not good. So I realized that we need some kind of solution. I had no idea what it would be, but has to be something. And then I started thinking, well, how do you do that? And I realized, well, instead of markets, which are very kind of adversarial, that basically it's one against the other, it's competition over resources. Maybe there's other ways to do it, and one, you know, a few years down the road, once I kind of found found out how Ethereum works and stuff like that, that I realized that, wait a minute, there's other mechanisms that are not just kind of markets, but you have like consensus mechanisms that can do other things, um, that can actually bridge that divide. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, that basically how things are progressing without this, you know, public market, basically, that the public says, yes, this benefits us and we can fund this, and then the public benefits from it. If you don't have that, then a lot of things are leading in the wrong direction. Sorry for rambling, but that's kind of where I'm coming from and why I think this is important.
Yeah, I like that. It makes me think about when I was a younger person and first getting going, working in tech. I was working for a company that did um, data recovery, um, and also like data collection for legal technologies. So it was like chain of custody and metadata, preserving metadata, and all that kind of stuff was like really important. But anyway, the point of this is that I very quickly, when I started working for this company, started moving into a role where I was defining process flows and improving process flows to make them repeatable and ensure that we maintain maximum level of it, like not messing anything up, because there was ways you could do things wrong and there's ways you had to do things to do them right to ensure that you preserved all this metadata for chain of custody and whatnot. And so people had to follow really specific process flows to ensure that you get a new employee, and it's like that's the onboarding process, right? The challenge is figuring out how to follow this process flow. And the more I worked for this company and the more I was doing this, the more I started to realize that what I was actually doing was taking all of the experience and skill and knowledge of the employees that had been there the longest and doing things the longest and figuring out all of these things, how to do them the right way. Because this company started out as just like a small little bootstrap, right? And it had grown into a larger company. So the people that had been there for a long time, they like had all this knowledge in their head, and my job was to take that knowledge and convert it into a process flow that we could repeat with new employees. But what that was really doing was just lowering the bar for employees so that the people who had all the skills and experience basically could like be ushered out of the company because they were getting paid a lot of money because they had all the knowledge. And so we wanted to extract the company, the business, the corporation wanted to extract the knowledge from the valuable employees, turn them into a process flow that the company owns, and then hire less expensive employees that are required contractually to follow this process flow. If they deviate from the process flow, then they get fired. And so that's how they ensure, instead of ensuring high quality with experience and skill that's well rewarded, they ensured quality with very disposable, low cost employees. And that's what like made me lose interest in everything that I was doing, and I quit working in the tech industry and just like went and I spent a decade being a landscaper instead, because it just seemed insane to me that I was taking all of these highly skilled individuals' value and just converting it into a profit margin for the corporation so that the CEO could have a bigger bonus that year. And something about that system just didn't sit right with me. And I think that's like really that core experience has driven everything that I've done in crypto since I started working in this industry, to try to reverse that and do the opposite and actually capture that value that people have with their skill and experience and figure out how to still create systems that can scale and grow, and incentives for new people to learn new things, but not just to funnel all of the profit, all of the value up to the top of the the CEO pyramid scheme kind of structure. So that's my, I guess, story. I don't know if maybe these stories have prompted somebody else to have some contribution that they'd like to share.
I guess I could give a little bit of context. I don't really have a destination in mind, so we'll see where this initial thought kind of leads, but that's okay. um, I guess, um, yeah, maybe a bit. It's hard to. Everything is always so tied to your individual history. Um, so my history was always very buttoned up, very white collar jobs, and summer internships up through college, Ivy League boy. Um, but then immediately after graduating, I think at that point I was like, okay, I've been in this world. I worked for Pfizer for a handful of summers. I worked for like very credible people, like a lot of West Point folks, like very buttoned up. And yeah, realized like I don't really give a shit about the the what the corporation or what the company is kind of accomplishing here. Um, and yeah, very quick. Like well, after I got my diploma, I pivoted immediately and never took advantage of it. Um, but the other piece of context is I also very much lived in the social capital world where like the a lot of I put in a lot of effort, and my family put in a lot of effort to like um, one thing that my dad and my grandpa stumbled into was like we had a family friend at West Point, and they had a child that was deployed overseas and was just like twiddling their thumbs, had nothing to do. So long story short, started buying bootleg DVDs outside Penn Station and burning like like tens of thousands. It's not exactly environmentally friendly, but like sending an immense amount of DVDs overseas to troops deployed overseas. Not like a political statement of supporting what the U.S. military is doing or anything. Is more just like these are kids, and there's not necessarily any downside to bringing a little bit of happiness into their lives. And then like kind of living off riding the coattails of that social capital that's being developed to you know create opportunities for putting food on the table type stuff. So I feel like to me this whole value capture side of things, a lot of it, at least from my perspective, is figuring out ways to quantify and capture the social capital that you're creating. Because it's like when we're talking about like public good value capture, it's a lot of this. It's the stuff that like slips through the cracks and is not necessarily being quantified anywhere else. It's just like you're creating social capital. Like maybe you can turn that into something, maybe you can't. But that's kind of it's just like trickling into that bucket. Um, yeah, I think that's I don't even remember what I initially wanted to start talking about, but yeah, I think that's to me like the eight forms of capital, but to me a lot of it comes into the social capital because like you're creating good and people notice it, or you're benefiting somebody and figuring out a way to like capture that value and make something out of it. That's not just like oh it's this world's about all about who you know. So you're able to get that soulless corporate job because of it. But, yeah, that's some thoughts there. Yeah, that reputation layer that's kind of weighing whatever governance structure, whatever voting structure takes place of like allocating value. You have high trust individuals that have built up reputation. It's not just like a one person, one vote. It's come up with some sort of system that's not too self referential and gamified, but is additive in a way, which is easy. It's totally easy.
I think one aspect is also of it is a lot of the ways like corporate structure is and inside businesses and also just at the social layer still is it's still a bit extractive in the sense that you almost have, I kind of picture water flowing as in that's the value created, and whoever grabs their part and says like, I contributed, that's kind of how you stand out. And there's no actually the reverse of that, which is basically, trying to say, oh, all these people actually contributed. um, there's no incentive to do that. And because of that, the value is basically whoever extracts most gets the most at the moment, even though it's not how the value was created. And if we can flip that, if there's can actually be because if you think about it, if you create value and if a lot of people contribute to it, um, you would want to kind of perpetuate that loop. You would want people to be incentivized to create value, and for them to be incentivized to create value, you want to kind of acknowledge the value that they create as opposed to kind of acknowledge people who extract the value. That's like doesn't seem to be very sustainable. So like that kind of thinking really is influencing me lately, like kind of thinking of how do you flip that? How do you kind of create the incentives to um, be have this like pro-social aspect to it on not just the, especially at the social layer, especially like on Farcast, I guess a bunch of us are there, but just even more broadly, to kind of see value created and try to um, allocate it, you know, to distribute it based on who creates it, and that can create like these feedback loops. I'm just checking what Trix is building there on the mirror. Like this looks exciting. On-chain signaling, peer evaluation, critical tool. Should you share it like an or you think not necessarily?
Share it where?
Like on the screen.
Oh, I have it shared on the recording.
Oh, okay.
I figure everybody in the call can just be in the Miro board, but yeah, I am recording it on the or sharing it on the recording. I've got the video chat like in a little sub window, and then the Miro board behind it,
Oh, nice. Okay, perfect.
so people
All
can watch me
right,
take notes.
nice. So we're kind of coming to the end of the hour. Do you guys have like, final comments before we kind of continue this more async, this discussion and kind of building on that? Do you have kind of um, comments that are either directly related or kind of more tangential to what we're doing? Let's have some feedback.
Yeah, I'd be curious if people, I mean, any general feedback is helpful. Also, specifically, if you have feedback on like what would be helpful for us to do asynchronously to prepare for the next workshop to make it more accessible and engaging for you. Like what ideas do you have around like prompts we could do? We could create some like little activities in the mural board, just like brainstorming things or like anything at all. If you have any suggestions, I'm totally open to that. I'm happy to do some work and prep in the mural board. Or if the mural board's not part of your suggestion, that's fine too. But yeah, that'd be the most helpful feedback in my opinion.
I know I'm hopping in here late, so apologies. I was on another call. Um, so I think high level for me, some thoughts are around kind of what the approach is like long term to kind of validate this? Is it going to be like a consultancy type of approach where go to different communities that are building public goods and help them capture their value, right? Or is it more like of a research thing where it might be talking to different communities, but not trying to like directly like have some type of maybe tangible output, but just more so gather data information. Um, so yeah, just want to understand like what are the goals and let's say the this quarter and Q4, let's say.
So the idea is to kind of start with the problem space, then move to the solution space, then build something, and get feedback on the way from communities, like what they need, especially Web3 communities, obviously. But if you think going outside of Web3 also makes sense, we can also do that. But eventually, the idea is to build kind of a mechanism that communities can use and can actually um, able to capture value in a self-sustainable way, not just um, sustainable. Like there's a difference there, but basically in a way where the public good is creates value, and it can capture that value, and that value recycles into creating more goods that are beneficial for the community, and like the people who create those goods can do so in a self-sustainable way, almost like creating
Hmm.
a business model for the public good creation. So that's the idea, but there's also has to be feedback along the way from communities, like what it is, for example, is the most critical thing at the moment that um, you know let's say Allo or Gitcoin or different communities are facing, that what's the thing that's most critical to them um, to look at, and we can kind of try to integrate that into how we're progressing in the space.
Hmm. Yeah, I think to add to that, because I think that to me the hardest thing with like solving this problem is how large it is, right? Like it's a big scope. So like, and we've talked about this before, but I definitely think finding the context window, like an appropriate context window to where the solution actually is able to be fully fleshed out in a reasonable amount of time, right? Because some of the larger things are going to take longer to figure out because it has way more context, way more inputs to, align. So I kind of want to like have the understanding. Well, I know there's something to figure out, but I guess my take would be to like make sure the context window is manageable and healthy and digestible so that like it could actually be addressed in a meaningful way. I don't know what that is. And it might be multiple context windows, right? I'm not trying to say like it needs to be just one. But yeah, just kind of yeah,
Yeah,
curious there.
that's a really good feedback. I definitely wrote that one down in the notes. Identifying, you know, you're right. There's probably going to be a handful of different like context scopes, but we need to break this down into those chunks so that we can actually define practical and reasonable solutions for. But we do need to have the fullness of the scope too. It is a large problem, and we can start
Hmm.
out in little sections and solve little bits, but they all have to feed together into this grander, large scope, solution for it to have that sustainability, aspect. I think that Mike was referencing, but absolutely
Hmm.
agree with you. The context scope is critical, and I think we're gonna that'll be probably some of what we do with the first step of identifying the problem space. Then as we move forward from that, we can start breaking down the problem space into these contexts that are more digestible.
Hmm.
Right. I totally agree with that. And I think like we need to think about it strategically, basically, as you said, like identifying what can have the most impact in kind of in the shortest period of time. If we have multiple things we're addressing, maybe we can focus on the ones that can create the most impact, and then move on other things later. And we can integrate that into the process, like this strategic kind of thinking of how we approach things.
Yeah. Hmm.
Anything else before we close our first session?
I guess I have more of a question. So I finished reading your article that you put out yesterday, Mike.
Hmm.
Um, so to me, it seems like we're almost creating the mechanism for communities to create their own mechanism. And just as it's not like one pile of money that, all right, this is the pile of money. It's like the ability to create an infinite number of pile of monies that are allocated based on, each individual pile having its own like custom mechanism for allocating. Um, and like it's like a wisdom of the crowds type of situation more than this is the solution. Is that accurate, or am I?
Um, Well, so first of all, that's kind of my thinking. I'm not saying that this is the way we have to move forward. I'm saying like this is my thinking, because I think if you can start with a small community, or a community, versus like, let's build a solution for everyone and everyone has to accept it. Um, I just think that's not a path that's just it's gonna work. But if you build it in
Yeah.
small chunks and make it scalable, and if it works here, and then other people see that it works here and they want to recreate it, the idea is that it's scalable in the sense that these communities can then come together. It's not like you still have to do it as small communities, but rather that you kind of showcase that this thing works on a small scale and that it's scalable. I think that's, again, part of the strategic thinking of how do we make this thing in a way that you can actually implement it, and in a way that people can um, adopt it and use it, and how it can grow. So that's at least my thinking. If there's other ways of thinking about this way, different approaches that maybe make more sense, I'm perfectly fine with discussing those and kind of, seeing what makes more sense.
It's definitely something that I'm interested in, curious about as we go through this. So I appreciate the question, Maddie, because it's hard to know if there will be just like a singular solution or if it will have to be more modular, kind of, I think, as you were describing, Maddie, like different
Mhm.
communities could have different needs that require a different solution, and having optionality to choose in a way that still can, like Mike's saying, connect to this, other communities, and have not just like isolating a community in a silo because they needed something a little different.
Yeah, ideally the value measurement system is standardized, but the individual community, like an individual community, they have $500 coming in via this other source, so it's like balancing it out within whatever else they have going on. But figuring out the interop across communities is more just like a broad value capture measurement system. And then like the capital allocation side of things is different. It's just like pulling levers slightly differently within individual communities.
And just one aspect of that is, I'm thinking like, let's say a community is a city, but you can also be part of, a region or whatever it is, and a state. Like you can be in multiple communities at the same time, and they can be kind of stacked. It doesn't, and you distribute your resources based on what's important to you. Like I feel part of it is really that you're empowering individuals and you're empowering communities. um, that's kind of the goal. And the individuals and the communities would decide how they want to distribute their resources in a way that benefits them, as opposed to like benefit some external, you know, locus.
Okay, yeah, I gotcha. That's interesting. So then, yeah, it's you're not forcing. All right, this is the mechanism. Everybody must use it. But ideally, communities will kind of gravitate together and form like larger conglomerates of like, yeah, we're kind of sharing resources and sharing the accrual of reputation within like a larger region.
Right. And one point of it is that, again, as I pointed in the article, that these are not, you're not competing. Like, the public good is something that benefits everyone. But if there's a lot of demand for the specific public good, like, I don't know, research on, some medical or whatever, and communities find that a lot more important than something else, then you would want the resources to go toward what's there's more kind of what would benefit more, benefit them more. So the idea is to allow them to have that, the ability to have a public good that benefits most people. That's kind of the goal.
Yeah. The capital formation side of things is another whole, like, how are all these different communities and areas and bioregions forming that capital in a way that's, but I guess, one thing at a time.
That's part of the solution space. That's all part of the challenge. It's not separate from it. It's part of it. All right, guys. Any other kind of final questions? I know we're a bit over time. Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. I really appreciate the effort to make this, inclusive of what we might have assumed about some things. And I'll be using the Miro to play around with that. I appreciate the effort there, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody showing up. This is it's gonna take some intention for us to really push into this. So appreciate you guys being here for the beginning and being willing to share your thoughts. Any insight anybody has on anything you want to throw in the Miro board is appreciated, and we'll just keep. Uh, yeah, I'll ping anytime I put any reasonable amount of work into it throughout the month before the next workshop, so people can kind of get a little reminder to check out updates. If anybody else does the same, and if you don't want to, make a big deal out of what notes you put in there, that's fine. But happy to review anything that people share.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much, guys.
See ya. Have a good day.
Bye.
Take care.